welcome back to
Conservation Recruiters.
Today we're back with Kyle, the invasive species specialist, and Sam, the environmental surveyor, by popular demand.
Our fans could not get enough of y'all. You guys were the most requested to come back by far.
Glad we were such a hit.
We're happy to be back. Thank you again for having us.
Well, first of all, how was everything after Hurricane Ian? Were you guys affected?
I actually had some flooding from the lake at the back of my house. Thankfully, nothing extreme, but there was some minor damage.
I wasn't affected too badly, but unfortunately not all Floridians were so lucky. My friend who lives by Lake Eola had significant leakage in her apartment, and a lot of people's homes and apartments were deemed unlivable.
Well, lakes can play a volatile part of our ecosystem, but they can also provide us with so much, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
All right, Alexis, why don't you kick us off with some background information?
Yeah, no problem. Well, first to start out, Florida has the second highest proportion of any state of lake and ponds. Lakes are considered to be non-flowering wetlands of natural depressions that lack emergent vegetation, except for around the perimeter. There are around 30,000 lakes and ponds in Florida, many of them being vulnerable to acidification, and they can commonly be labeled as nutrient deficient.
Aren't most of them located in the center of the peninsula, or am I mistaken and they're more towards the coast?
No, you're right. Most lakes do occur in the central peninsula or central panhandle, but they aren't very abundant towards the coastal areas. A lot of them are relatively small, with the exception of Lake Okeechobee, of course, which is over 451,000 acres and 3 feet deep, which is actually quite shallow.
Yeah, I read somewhere that Lake Okeechobee is the 10th largest lake in the country. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. It's actually 20% of our total lake area here in Florida. Characteristics of lakes differ depending on the type of lake it is. Their bottom substrates can include sand, silt, or even organic matter. Vegetation also varies from complete coverage of aquatic plants to sometimes no plants at all. It really just depends on the water chemistry.
Their water inputs and outputs can affect that too, no?
Yeah, actually, water input usually derives from rainfall and groundwater seepage flow, while output is through evaporation and groundwater seepage flow. The lakes that are perfectly rounded, such as Lake Eola, are formed from sinkholes. Some sinkhole lakes can actually join together, causing a different kind of shape to form, so they're not really rounded anymore. Others can be formed due to depressions via subsidence or solution holes.
What are the most common types of lakes here in Florida?
Some of our largest lakes are prairie lakes. They're alkaline and they have high amounts of mineral content, making them eutrophic for their large amounts of vegetation. There are also clay hill and sandhill lakes that form.
I do remember you mentioning clay hill and sandhill classifications for the high pine episode. Do they differ in the same ways?
Sort of. They tend to play hand in hand. Clay hill lakes are most common in upland high pine communities, and they have a clay substrate. Their water chemistry varies from neutral to acidic conditions, which creates an algeotrophic environment, meaning there's a low nutrient availability. Lake Jackson is an example of this type of lake, which is actually near Tallahassee. These shorelines are dominated by hydrophytic shrubs and forbs, and their more shallow regions have denser vegetation. On the other hand, sandhill lakes are located in upland communities that are formed from sinkholes. Their substrate consists of organic matter covering the sandy floor and are generally shallower than clay hills are. Their water chemistry is slightly neutral to acidic, and they're also very algeotrophic. Their shallow shores can consist of aquatic plants or graminoids.
Sam, I remember you saying earlier today that you did a survey at a lake recently.
Yeah, I actually just did a survey over at Lake Apopka. The main issue we were seeing out there was high contamination levels in the water. In the last decade, lakes around the world have been experiencing increased pollution and contamination levels, and this is largely due to human activity in several forms. Although Florida is one of the states that contains the highest amount of lakes, it is nationally ranked number 1 in the most polluted amount of lakes in the country.
I know that's a major issue. What specifically is causing these contamination levels to rise?
The biggest threat to lakes is not addressing the agriculture industry, which has a side product of agricultural runoff. During the process of cultivating crops, farmers use toxic pesticides that end up getting swept into nearby bodies of water from rain or sprinklers. This agricultural runoff contains excessive nutrients, that cause harmful algal blooms in the water, also known as eutrophication.
Is that what you were seeing in Lake Apopka?
Yes, we specifically saw high phosphorus levels, and this is extremely harmful since it feeds these algal blooms. And it's pretty sad to see because Lake Apopka used to be a diverse fishing hub, and now the water content is too toxic to support aquatic life.
Wow, my dad and I used to go fishing there all the time. It's a shame the condition it is in right now.
Well, have there been any regulations to mitigate the amount of agricultural runoff?
So, in Florida, nearly 900,000 acres of lakes are classified as impaired for swimming or healthy aquatic life because of excessive agricultural runoff, human waste, and pollution. The Clean Water Act of 1972 was created to prohibit the disposal of pollution into canals, rivers, and other bodies of water, which is great and all, but it clearly has not been well enforced. A lot of lakes in the Everglades, unfortunately, are also affected, but the EPA created a $23 billion restoration plan to remediate the damage from inflowing pollution. However, still today, about 3 to 5 times more phosphorus resides in the lake than the limit set by the state, which is 140 metric tons, so there's still much work to be done. While eutrophication is a major threat to lakes, it has also spurred more threats to the ecosystem, which Kyle will now talk about.
That's correct, Sam. Similar to more terrestrial ecosystems, the lakes here in the state of Florida also suffer from a myriad of different invasive aquatic species. As a reminder to our listeners, here in the state, using the Florida Exotic Plant Pest Council's recommendations, we rank invasive species as a Category 1 or as a Category 2, based off how they affect the ecosystem. 1 being the most harmful due to its ability to crowd out and kill native plant species, while 2 is still harmful, but it is able to better coexist with native plants.
Can you give us some examples of aquatic invasives here in the state?
Sure. Some of the more common plants are water hyacinth, hydrilla, and Cuban bulrush. All of these plants can be classified as a Category 1 on the invasive plant scale and are very dangerous to the ecosystems they are in.
So what exactly about these plants makes them a Category 1 on that scale?
One of the things that are most common about these aquatic invasive plants is their ability to overcrowd and clog up waterways in the state. All 3 of the previously mentioned plants grow at a very quick rate and can cover the surface of a lake or river in a very short amount of time. This shows the rank 1 ability to form a monoculture and kill native species. This overcrowding of a lake's upper level has a multitude of effects on the ecosystem and its services.
And what exactly are these effects?
First and foremost, the blocking out of sunlight prevents native plants on the bottom of the lake floor from receiving energy and causes a rapid decline in population. As mentioned before, this, combined with runoff and eutrophication, greatly reduces the amount of oxygen in the water. More importantly to Florida, this lack of oxygen and resources causes a decline in small microorganisms which serve to feed native fish populations in the area. A research review done by scientists in the Journal of Aquatic Plant Management found that lakes infested by hydrilla led to a decline in cyanobacteria, thus creating a reduction and sometimes a complete removal of certain native fish species from that ecosystem.
That really highlights the ripple effect invasives impose on an ecosystem. It starts small and then leads to decimation of larger populations that not only we are dependent on, but so are hundreds of different kinds of plants and animals. It really knocks the equilibrium out of whack.
That's exactly correct, Nikki. More importantly, for the state of Florida as a whole, with the amount of flooding and rainfall we get, invasive aquatic species clog up waterways and slow down the flow of water in local drainage systems. We saw this firsthand with Hurricane Ian and recently Hurricane Nicole, as many rivers and lakes overflowed their bounds due to lack of proper drainage systems or clogged ones as well. This can lead to severe infrastructure damage as a result, as we've seen in the last month.
So you're basically saying that a problem for lakes is a problem for all, even the human population?
That's exactly correct, Alexis. But to finish off my point, I'm curious to know, in your mind, what is Florida best known for?
Definitely the beach.
When I think of Florida, I think of the Everglades.
It has to be Disney, 100%.
All great answers, and all play a part in what attracts people to our state. Fishing, seeing its natural beauty, and experiencing all it has to offer. More than just inter-ecosystem problems, invasive exotics can have a larger impact on the state at large. Clogged waterways interfere with fishermen who have come here to catch noteworthy state game. People come from across the country to swim in our lakes, rivers, and oceans, and more come for our beautiful landscape and unique Florida wildlife. All of this brings vital money into the state's economy that can be reinvested into helping maintain our ecosystem and many other state issues. Invasive aquatics serve to hamper the enjoyment of all these groups. The fishermen won't have any fish to catch due to reduction in population. Swimmers will not be able to enjoy overclogged waterways and lakes, and the natural beauty of the state will be reduced ever so slightly. Without this money, our efforts to maintain our natural world will not be as effective as they once were.
That seems selfish to prioritize humans when we are the sole cause of the problems that ecosystems are facing.
Well, that may be true, Sam. We as a human population are a part of the ecosystem as well, and even though we started many of these problems, it is incumbent upon us to be a proper state to fix them.
Well, Kyle, at least we are making efforts to conserve the environment, but I still think there's much more to be done.
Alrighty then, I think things are starting to heat up in the studio. Before a fist fight breaks out, let's move on to conservation efforts with Nikki.
So, as many Floridians are aware, Lake Okeechobee is the largest lake Florida has to offer and thus takes part in many ecosystem services. With it being about 20% of the total area of lake we have in the state, it's extremely important we work to counter the rising phosphorus levels and invasive species that are populating it.
Are there any initiatives to resolve this situation?
In 2000, the Lake Okeechobee Protection Act was instated. It requires that by 2004, the South Florida Water Management District conspires with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the Florida Department of Agriculture to complete a Lake Okeechobee Protection Plan. This act implemented a schedule for phases of phosphorus load reduction and also addresses exotic vegetation control and high and low water level impacts. This kickstarted the Lake Okeechobee Protection Program, also known as LOP. It is a phased comprehensive program designed to restore the lake by improving water quality and is composed of 8 distinct components.
What exactly are the components?
LOP includes the Lake Okeechobee Construction Project, which is construction of regional water management facilities to improve hydrology and water quality of the lake, and also involves construction of 2 stormwater treatment areas and a sediment removal project. There is also the Lake O Watershed Phosphorus Control Program, which aims to reduce phosphorus loads. This goes hand in hand with the Lake Okeechobee Internal Phosphorus Management Program that assesses feasibility, economic considerations, and all reasonable methods of phosphorus removal from the lake. And to help combat invasives, the Lake Okeechobee Exotic Species Control Program identifies invasives threatening native plants and animals of the lake.
I do know 2 invasive species of great concern in Lake Okeechobee are the Maluka tree and torpedo grass.
Exactly, Kyle. That's what the Exotic Species Control Program deals with the most in Lake O. LOP also implements a research and water quality monitoring program, which evaluates water quality data to develop a baseline for monitoring conditions and long-term ecological changes. They work to develop a water quality model for the lake, determining where the contributions of phosphorus are coming from. They also construct recommendations for water quality improvements and evaluate feasibility of nutrient reduction technologies.
Well, this sounds like a great initiative that the government has implemented. But aside from what the government is doing to combat the human-made problems, what can everyday people do to prevent further disturbances of lakes?
Citizens can mainly help when it comes to their decisions in landscaping. Minimizing the use of water, pesticides, and fertilizer on lawns, as well as planting vegetative buffers on slopes and at shorelines, reduces erosion, provides habitats, and limits the runoff that can potentially go into the lakes. You can also refrain from blowing grass clippings or leaves into lakes, as this can disturb nutrient levels and cause toxic algal blooms. Other ways to minimize contamination include properly disposing of household products that contain chemicals and not pouring them into the ground or into storm drains. And cleaning up after your pets to reduce bacteria contamination also helps.
That doesn't sound like too much to ask from the public.
You would think.
And if you think you are falling short on any of these recommendations, you can always donate to the Florida Lake Management Society. The link is going to be in our description.
And with that, it's time to wrap up for the day. Thank you to our lovely guests who always come bearing lively discussion that can sometimes get a little heated, but make for great entertainment.
Thanks for having us.
It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of
Conservation Recruiters.